Okay. Well, this is my first Christmas carol for the year. I sang tonight. It reminded me I've got to preach on Christmas Day in Rockhampton. And that's the first time I've preached on Christmas Day since I was here. 9 years ago, I think. 7 years ago or something, I'm not sure. I remember preaching a message here and we had a few visitors come in just off the street. I think I was preaching on John 3:16. I'm not sure. Someone else here might be able to remember, but I'm looking forward to getting home. I also learnt a new song tonight, which was good. It's always good to learn new songs. Tonight is going to be a little bit of a different message, which probably doesn't surprise most of you because I tend to be a little bit of a different preacher. But normally when a preacher preaches, he shares a verse, he explains a verse, he shares a few points, he gives you the answer, and we leave here. And that's pretty much it. Tonight I'm going to preach a message where I'm going to give you 5 questions. I'm going to explain the questions, and it's up to you to come up with the answers in your own way, hopefully through conviction and God talking to you. But questions are one of those things in life that some people enjoy, some people dread. And a question is simply the act of one person asking for information from another person or thing. Now, there are good and bad questions in life. If you're a man and someone comes up to you and says, "How tall are you?" That is a good question. I think most men enjoy that question, I'm 6'3". If you're a man and someone comes up to you and says, "How short are you?" That's not so good. Most men do not like that question. When someone comes up to you and says, "Have you lost weight?" Have you ever noticed when you say that, everyone sucks their stomach in? And you feel like saying, "Hey, look, you've just lost a bit more." But when someone says, "Have you lost weight?" that's a good question. When someone says to you, "How much do you weigh?" that's not a good question. When you get home and you say, "What's for dinner?" that's a good question. When you turn to your wife and say, "How did you cook this?" not a good question. Then there are dreaded questions. "Honey, do I look good in this?" Why do women ask that? I've never worked it out. Because there is no safe answer for a man to give. I've said to my wife, you can ask that question if you will allow me to answer honestly. But even if I want to be honest, I know I'm going to get into trouble. So I tend to just say, "Look, honey, we've really got to go. We've really got to go." And leave it at that. Then there are the questions that make you think. Which armrest on a plane is yours? Now, some of you, that's not an issue, but if you're fairly broad and you sit down, if I'm sitting next to the brother here, you want to know which armrest is yours. Why don't McDonald's sell hot dogs? My son loves hot dogs, but McDonald's sells burgers. Why don't they sell hot dogs? How far east can you go before you're heading west? I can see some of you are going, "This is going to really drive you crazy." Why is it someone driving faster than you is an idiot and everyone driving slower than you is a moron? When does it stop being partly cloudy and become partly sunny? On the news they always say it's partly cloudy. They never say it is partly sunny. And this is one of my favourites. Do you guys get Greenpeace people down here collecting money and things? Whenever they stop me and ask me for a donation or ask me to sign up to Greenpeace, I always say to them, "What do Greenpeace do when they see an endangered animal eating an endangered plant?" And they look at me and go, it really spins them out. It's really good to do. Why aren't curtains double-sided so your house looks nice inside and out? Well, that's something to think about. Why do we sing "Rockabye Baby" to put a child asleep when it's about putting a child in a tree and letting a wind smash the cradle? It is the most horrific song. "Rockabye Baby" on the treetop, when the wind blows, the cradle will rock, the branch will... No wonder children have nightmares. Why is Devon and ham round when bread is square? Why can't they make square Devon, fits on the slice? Beautiful. So there are lots of questions in life. But when we look at questions, we see something different when we start to look at Christ's questions in the Bible. Because they are so much more than just getting us to think. They are about getting us to think and act. Now, Jesus' question should cause us to examine ourselves And Jesus' question should cause a reaction and an action. Okay, follow me. Or will you do this? Won't you do this? They're things that happen. And so tonight we're going to look at this a little bit differently. But the first scripture tonight is Matthew chapter 5, verse 13. Matthew chapter 5, verse 13. It says, "Ye are the salt of the earth. But the salt hath lost his savour. Wherewith shall it be salted? It is henceforth good for nothing, to be cast out, to be trodden under the foot of man." I want to bring you the first thought tonight about your influence and whether you have any. Now, influence is simply the effect or the ability to affect others' beliefs and behaviour with or without authority. That's what influence is. Now, this is not the question to write down. We'll get to that in a minute, and I'll let you know so you can actually write it down. But have you ever thought, do you have influence? And the answer is that every single person has influence. Everyone has different spheres of influence. Everyone has different degrees of influence. Charlie is 4 years old and he has an incredible amount of influence. I call it the sacred tree, but it's not a sacred tree. We have this tree we planted on our church property for the senior saints. When we were building our main auditorium, it's a very, very big flash auditorium, we had a couple of the senior saints sell their beautiful houses. They had lovely old Queensland colonial homes. They sold them and moved into these tiny little apartments and gave their money to the church to buy the concrete slab that we built the church on. It was about $350,000 they gave. One man in particular, he literally gave $250,000. And we planted this beautiful tree in memory of all these guys who gave so much that they were never going to enjoy. But they were giving for the next generation so that they had somewhere to worship. And we planted this tree and we surrounded it by Sheena's gold. It's a plant that just grows beautifully up there. It's got these big thorns on it. And no one's really allowed to touch the tree. It's an unofficial off-ground sacred tree, we call it. I get a knock on my office door. "Pastor O'Derry." Yes, come on in. "No, you need to come and sort out your son." And I'm like, "What now?" Now, we had this thorn bush in Madagascar. Charlie's not afraid of it. He doesn't care if he gets scratches. Somehow he'd buried his way through the bush. It's about this wide. And he was at the top of the tree swinging. And he's singing, "Ya, ya, 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 ya," swinging like a big monkey, man. And round the tree, he was surrounded by about 20 other 3 and 4-year-olds. And they thought he is just an absolute hero. They follow him around going, man, and he's the only one that gets through. No one else is willing to go through. He does it. And I watch these kids, and here's this little 4-year-old boy. He's a little bit cheeky, a little bit rough, a little bit, I'm his father. But these kids follow him around. Wherever he goes, they follow. He has tremendous influence. You know, each and every one of us has influence. We can never get away from it. And influence is so much about time and things like that, but it goes beyond that. It's people will watch everything we all do. Even the people we don't respect, even the people we don't like, even the people who annoy us have influence on our lives. Even if it is to provoke us, even if it is to make us angry, they have influence. But real influence is not just taught. You're not going to teach. When you teach, it's not influence. Influence is observed. My son knows my wife is a delicate flower. Me, when I get home, you can crow peck, crab claw, Chinese burn, power drive off the top of the lounge, go into the knees, whatever you want to do, it is on for young and old. My wife is a delicate flower. We don't do that to mum. You do not do that to mum. Do not ever let me catch you doing that to mum. He has learnt that through observation. He has learned that. Now, I can say to him later in life, son, you need to respect your wife, you need to love your wife, you need to honour your wife, you need to hold your wife up, you need to help your wife. But if he has not seen me doing that, he's never going to do that. He will never, ever do that. Why? Because my influence is what he sees, it's what he observes. When you look at society today and you look at the way society acts, you only have to look at what influences society to work out why they're acting that way.
when we get home from work, if we instantly walk in the door and say, my boss is this and this and this, or if we get in the car after church and say, that preacher, what do you think about it? Oh, it's terrible. You watch, your kids are going to be doing the exact same thing. This is why influence is so important. And then Christ starts talking here, and he talks about salt and things like that, and he's basically likening salt to our influence. He's saying we have an influence. We have an influence in the world. Yeah, the salt of the earth. But the salt has lost its saviour. Wherewith shall it be salted? It is henceforth good to be nothing but to cast out and trodden underfoot. So he's likening salt as an ingredient. Now, salt is the second most important ingredient in the world. The first and most important was found by an Ethiopian goat herder called Caldi, who found some red berries that made his goats jump, and he left them by the fire and created coffee. That is naturally the most important ingredient. Salt is the second most important ingredient. But we all need salt, and we all love salt. And salt is actually essential to maintaining our body. And an exact percentage of it is always found in our bodies. But the thing is, salt is never the ingredient. It is always the influence. I've never, in 17 years of cooking, I've never had someone walk in and say, can I please have a bowl of salt with some fries on the side? They would never do that. So when we look at this, and Christ is saying, he goes on to tell us that we are the light of the world and everything like that. He's saying you are like salt. You have an influence. Now, salt has three distinct qualities. First thing is salt, or salt is preserving. Our influence can be preserving. Our influence can be preserving. As Christians, we are to be the salt that preserves. We are the ones that are left behind. The apostles are gone. The saints have gone. We are it. Our influence is what has been left to save humanity. To literally give people the chance of spending eternity with Christ. You cannot get more preserving than that. You say, but can't I just stand there and speak? No, people are going to watch how you act. They're going to watch what you do. That is what's going to influence someone. The greatest witness, the most powerful tool in talking to someone about Christ is your own life, not what's printed anywhere. When they see the change in your life and the way you behave and everything, then they can be influenced through it. So though we can actually preserve life by showing them that Christ died and showing them that the sins can be forgiven, and that is what I call preserving power. But the second thing is this: salt can be corrosive. And our influence can be just as corrosive as it can be preservative. Instead of turning people to God, so often we can actually turn people away from God. When I travelled around Australia, I was amazed at how many people I met who said I would never step foot in a church again. They'd come through the doors for healing, they were cut and wounded and went back out. We have to be so careful that our influence in people's lives is preserving and not corrosive. When you look at Christ, and you look at what was said, for the wages of sin is death. That's a cut. But can you imagine going door knocking? Hi, I'm from Bible Baptist Church, Queanbeyan. The wages of sin is death. Thank you. Have a nice day. God didn't do that. For the wages of sin is death, but the gift of life, or the gift of God is life eternal. We need to realize this. We need to realize that we can be corrosive or we can be preserving. And the thing we must remember is that our fight is not with the unsaved. Our fight is not with the lost. Our fight is with the devil. The unsaved are merely sheep not off this fold. And you can go out there and you can get someone to stop drinking and they simply go to hell sober. You can get someone to stop smoking and they simply go to hell with good set of lungs. You can get someone to put on a suit and wear a tie and they go to hell well dressed. It doesn't matter. What matters is what's in here. So our fight is not to go there. We are called Bible bashers. Why? Because we go and we hound people and we bash people not about salvation but about things that really are not important. Are not important. We end up turning them away from God. They don't want anything to do with us. They don't want to walk through the church. We become the church that's known as the noisy dog of the neighborhood. You know, you got the neighborhood dog that always barks, just constantly barks. And people know what the church is against. They know what the church is angry about, but they never know what the church is really about. Because we spend all our time fighting and arguing and, oh brother, yeah, we're against that and we're against that, but what are you for? What are you actually for? So many churches in Australia now have this corrosive presence that, man, I don't even want to go into them. They asked me to preach and I'm like, man, I don't want to come to your church. Because of what's the spirit and everything. You know, I've got this is not going to happen, I'm not saying that, but imagine if we went to heaven and God said, welcome home, Jeff. These are all the people that through your influence you have won to Christ. You'd get pretty puffed up and go, whoa. I hope so anyway. But imagine if he said, Jeff, these are all the people that through your influence have gone to hell. It starts to make us realize that our influence is a pretty important thing. People watch what we do far more than they listen to what we say. When we just had our floods in Rockhampton, we have completely changed the perception of our church in our city. First, you know, I'm standing by the river on sunrise. You know, unbelievable, being interviewed by Natalie Barr, which was fantastic. Then we had 150 people every day in filthy, muddy conditions with crocodiles and brown snakes helping people out of their houses, and all of a sudden Rockhampton went, Lighthouse Baptist Church, man, they really care. We did something. We used our influence to preserve people's lives. So when we look at salt, it can preserve, it can corrode, but most of all, it can be absent. If you leave sea salt on the ground, it will actually lose its youthfulness. It becomes nothing. They call it, I think it's a stagnant mineral. It has no actual use. You know, a lot of Christians have an absent influence. Hey, Brother Jeff, would you like to come to a barbecue this week? No, sorry, I can't. No, look, yeah, I can after church. You know, or after I do this. But many Christians live like the Secret Service, you know. They're undercover except on Sundays. An absent influence can be just as dangerous as anything else. So your first question tonight is this. I want you to list 5 people you have influence over. And don't just go my wife and my 4 kids if you've got 4 kids. But think about 5 people you have influence over and ask yourself, what kind of influence do you truly have? Is it preserving? Are they seeing Christ? Are they understanding Christ in your life? Is it corrosive? Do they want nothing to do with you and your church? Nothing to do with Christ? Nothing to do with the Bible? Or is it completely absent? You know, do the people in your workplace even know you worship God? Or is it something you keep hidden and secret from them? And just work out which one of those ones fit with each of those people. Now, number 2 tonight is found in John chapter 13, verse 38. And Jesus answered him and said, Wilt thou lay down thy life for my sake? Verily, verily, I say unto thee, the cock shall not crow till thou hast denied me thrice. You know, very few of us will face martyrdom. You know, there's a Baptist preacher got to heaven, and he walked over to a bunch of guys, and they're all having a conversation about how they got there. Now, one man said, well, I was put in a log and sawn asunder. And they all went, ooh. Another man said, I was tied to a stake and burnt to a crisp. Oh, wow, brother. Another man said, I was put on a rack and I was ripped in half. And they turned to the Baptist preacher and said, how did you get there? Cholesterol. Cholesterol is not martyrdom, okay? Few of us are ever going to die of martyrdom. Few of us will ever pay the price of our beliefs because of martyrdom. And I think it's bad because I think in some ways it causes weakness in us. That we don't really face persecution other than maybe being caused the name. I remember one couple that we won to the Lord in Madagascar, and they made the decision to get baptized. And the next day we found them sleeping in the church building, and we were like, man, what's going on? And they explained to us that when they got saved and baptized, they lived in what they call a Whakatane, which is like a village. It's around, there's about 5 houses in it, all owned by the family. They lived in one, grandparents, everything. When the family found out they'd gotten saved and baptized, they took everything they owned, dumped it out the front of the Whakatane and set it on fire. And they walked home, and as they arrived at their house, their grandfather said, no, you must leave now. He shut the gates, and as far as they were concerned, they were gone. Now, they knew that was going to happen before they followed the Lord in believers' baptism, and they still did it. Imagine if we had to face that sort of thing. Man, like, it doesn't take much for us to sort of cave in and give up. Yet Christ is saying, are you willing to die? Are you willing to die for me? And so often we're afraid. One person says something to us and we're already running out the door. But dying for Christ is so much more than a physical death. It means dying to self in so many ways. Giving up your career, giving up pride, goals, hobbies, finances, whatever you want. You need to give this up and die to Christ and let Christ truly have your life. The problem is you actually end up becoming almost a freak because you are living such a different life. But that is what Christ wants. The difference people see in your life should not be something to be ashamed of, because it's the very thing that God uses as influence in someone else's life. That thing that makes you different is what's going to tell people about Christ. So question number 2 tonight is, does Christ have influence in all areas of your life? Does Christ have influence in all areas of your life? Number 3 tonight is, what influence does Christ have in your life? It's found in Luke 6:46. It says, and why call ye me Lord, Lord, and do not the things which I say? Whosoever cometh to me and heareth my sayings and doeth them, I will show you to whom he is like. How much like Christ are you tonight? If you ever come to Lighthouse Baptist Church, I'm not going to have to introduce you to Charlie O'Derry. I've never ever had to introduce Charlie O'Derry to anyone. First time visitors who have never seen a photo, never seen an image of him, go to me, is that your son? Every time. And you look at the photo, I know he's got my eyes and all that. No, the way he acts. I have a terrible habit of every time I stand anywhere, I stand like that. I always find something to lean on. When I'm preaching, when I'm talking to someone, I'll find a pole and I'm always crossing my legs. When Charlie talks to anyone, sometimes he gets it wrong and he actually falls and misses the pole and things like that. The way he dressed, the way he acts, the way he greets someone, the way he talks, his sense of humor. You know, if my wife is gone into the video cabinet and there is a glass of ice sitting on the table, I guarantee you we will both start smirking at the same time because we know exactly what we're going to do with that ice. It's not him corrupting me or me corrupting. There is an incredible amount of influence. But when people look at you, who do they see? Who do they actually see in your life? Do they see your Father? Do they see Christ? You see, influence, like salt, affects the whole dish. If you have Christ's influence in your life, it will affect the whole dish. You cannot put salt in this part of a dish and have it not affect everything. If you truly have Christ's influence in your life, it will affect every single part of you. Now that doesn't mean we walk around like angelic choir boys. Okay? Many people think that giving your life to the Lord, you've got to give up everything and you're going to live the most boring life you could have imagined. Man, you guys have heard some of my stories. Man, I was a bodyguard in Europe. I built bomb shelters in Israel. I was an executive chef. I've traveled down most of the world's rivers. I've been to most of the world's countries. I've been in war zones. I've been shot at. I've been so close to tigers and everything. I've lived such an exciting life. But what I did when I lived in the world compared to what I've done after I came back to Christ does not compare. When I gave my life to Christ, it was like I got in a V8 supercar, floored it, and took my hands off the wheel. It's literally like that. I'm in Queanbeyan tonight. Tomorrow I'm back in Rockhampton. Next week I'm down in Brisbane. The week after I'm in Cambodia. It just does not stop. When you have Christ's influence in your life, believe me, He will make your life so exciting as we become more like our Father. But let me ask you this tonight. If I followed you around from Monday to Saturday with a video camera without you knowing, and then we showed it on a big screen with no words and no music, would someone see Christ? My son will show me without words or music. You look at him and you go, that is Charlie O'Derry, son of Jeff O'Derry. But would people see Christ in us? On Monday, on Tuesday, on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, on Saturday when you've had a whole week of work? Or do they have to wait till Sunday when you become super Christian and stick on the tie and the suit and try to carry your Bible as high as possible so everyone sees? If Christ is an influence in your life, people will be able to see who your Father is. They'll see a difference in you. They'll truly see a difference in you. Christ's influence is not a set of rules. It's an actual way of life. It permeates into everything you do. You say, but, can't you just obey the 10 Commandments? You can obey the 10 Commandments and not even know Christ. It's not about 5 simple rules, 10 simple rules, 20 simple rules. It's not about ties or suits or anything like that. It's about everything. My son is influenced by me in every single area of his life. The classic at the moment, Kylie rang me today. He refuses to go to the bathroom without a newspaper. He holds off as long as physically possible if he's playing. He jumps up, got to go to the bathroom, runs to the bathroom, and he sat there and he yells out to his nana, Nan, I need a newspaper. Now, I don't know where he gets that from. Every area of his life is influenced by me. He just sees what I do, that's it. I've got to do it. I want to do it. We should be the same. If Christ has become an influence in our life, then we should be the same. People should see Christ. So your third question tonight is, how much like Christ are you? How much like Christ are you? And if you write down very, very like Christ, think about what happens when someone treats you like a servant. Are you still very like Christ then? Because remember, Christ was a servant. Number 4 tonight is found in John chapter 6, verse 67. Then said Jesus unto the 12, will ye also go away? Many people think I'll stay with Christ to the end. I'm going to live my life for Christ. Yet at the end of the day, Christ walked alone to the cross. He was by himself. He walked that road. All these men had stood by him and learnt from him and taking what they could. Yet he walked to the cross alone. In John chapter 6, it seems that Jesus is doing all he can to drive away as many people as he can from the ministry. Now, evidently, he didn't read some of the books I've read on the subject of leadership and success in ministry. We're supposed to build a big ministry. We are always trying to be successful through enlargement campaigns, and here's Jesus with an ensmallment campaign. He starts off with over 5,000 people and he ends up with 12 men and one of them's not even saved. Now, if he was a missionary, he'd lose support because he was a failure. 12 men. 3 years, you got 12 men, big deal. He ends up with these 12 men and he issues a call to commitment. He knows that many of these followers are merely following them for what they can get, not for what they can give. It's so true today. It's so true today. We want the blessings. We want our prayers answered. You know, we want to have peace. We want to have comfort as long as we don't actually have to do anything for it. Jesus looks at this small band and he says to them, we also go away. And we are living in an hour where many are walking away from the things of the Lord. And the fact of the matter is that while not everyone walks away from the Lord, some do. And the main reason for this is people just don't want to make a commitment. They don't want to stick it out. I'll follow you, Lord, until it gets tough. I'll follow you, Lord, until times get hard. I'll follow you, Lord, until we just can't take it anymore. And believe me, I understand that. You guys heard that story this morning. There were many times I wanted to quit. Many times I wanted to walk away. Many times I just thought I couldn't take it anymore. I remember when we lost our son, Nathaniel, I was so angry with God. So angry. Why? I went to Madagascar, I went on deputation, I did everything you asked me to do, and look where we've ended up. But I didn't walk away from God. And the thing to remember is that people always walk away from God, not the other way round. God never ever walks away from us. For 17 years I wandered away from God. I remember being in the ashram in India and I was about to go through this ceremony thing, and I still remember to this day as if God stretched down his hand and grabbed me by the shoulder and said, you go through with this, I'm going to let you go. But he'd never walked away from me. He was right there with me. And I remember turning to Kylie and saying, I've got to go right now. And she said, why? And we had a room of about 500 people in southern India and everyone had prostrated themselves on the ground and me and Kylie, the only ones standing in the center of the room. And she's looking at me and I said, I have to go right now and sort something out with God. I think she said, have you eaten a mushroom? Or something like that. She'd never heard me talk about God. She was a bit freaked out. And I ran outside and I spoke to God. But God will never walk away from you. So when we think about this, when we think about it and God says, will you walk away? How do you rate Christ's influence in your life Monday to Saturday? Say, why do you say that? Because on Sunday, it's very easy to have Christ's influence in our life. We hear 2 messages. We have a time of fellowship with Christians. But what happens when you get back to the workplace and everyone's carrying on? When no one's seeing you with your Bible. No, you can leave your Bible and let it collect dust. On a scale of 1 to 10, how do you rate Christ's influence Monday to Saturday? And then lastly, point number 5, we see Christ's influence will be rejected by some. And Luke chapter 12, verse 49 to 51, it says, I'm come to send fire on the earth, and what will I if it be already kindled? But I have a baptism to be baptized with, and how am I straight until it be accomplished? Suppose ye that I am come to give peace on earth? I tell you, nay, but rather division. What will you do with God's truth today? What will you do with God's influence? Will you allow it to change you, to mold you? Will you allow it to control your influence so your influence can be something that can truly preserve someone's life? We all have a choice. We come to church and we hear messages week after week, month after month, and so often we just walk out the door without ever allowing it to change us or to develop us or to build us or to grow us. Oh, we want God's influence in our life on Sunday. We maybe take a little bit of influence on Wednesday night, but leave me the rest of the week. Leave me alone the rest of the week. Will you reject Christ's influence? Will you surrender to Christ's influence? Or will you simply ignore it? I want you to just take a moment, and I'm pretty much done. Most of you know me now well enough to know that I preach until I feel I'm done, and then I just stop. And so I'm just going to stop. I remember I was telling you earlier this morning, we have tried witnessing to Kylie's family for 8 years now. Never once have they allowed us to. They shut us down. They will tell us off. I remember I was talking this morning about when Nathaniel was born. Kylie's mum, who she is a staunch Catholic and just really dislikes the fact that we're Baptists and we believe we're going to heaven and all this. But I remember her coming up to me, and she's seen us as hippies, she's seen us as punks, she's seen us as all sorts of things over the last 20 years, and she thought we were merely going through another stage. I remember the first time she met me and I had a 2-foot green mohawk. And Kyla was like, "This is my boyfriend." And she was like, "Okay." My face looked like it had been dunked in a tackle box. I had piercing, all sorts of things going on. And so she thought when all of a sudden I turned up in a suit carrying a Bible, this is just another phase Jeffrey's going through, ignore it. And we started trying to talk to them, and I was hardcore. Man, I'm going to get them saved in the first week. Let's get onto it. And we were in that hospital, and she came up to me, and she said, "Jeff," she said, "after watching you and Kylie, I really believe that what you guys believe may be true." We'd held Nathaniel, we'd said goodbye to Nathaniel, and she was with us the whole time. And she just said, "You guys are just so at peace." So, what was that? Something we did? No, we didn't do anything. I can tell you now, I wept like I've never wept before. I was heartbroken. My wife was heartbroken. We were holding his hand, saying goodbye. It's just one of those things that. But she saw something. Our influence literally grabbed hold of her heart and changed her. You say, "Well, that's obviously because you've been to Bible college. That's obviously because you've got a nice suit." That's none of that. We simply decided as a husband and wife, as a family, we were going to allow Christ's influence to permeate every part of our life. Every part. What do you want to do today? What does Christ want to do today? You say, "Well, do you get up in the morning and say that?" No, obviously I know I've got things to do tomorrow. I've got things to do the next day. But we just let Christ lead us. Our hands are off the steering wheel. He takes us wherever. And through that, people look at our lives, and through our influence, we can have that preserving power. I want you to just stop and think for a minute. Firstly, what's your influence like? What do your friends, your neighbours, your work people think of you? And secondly, I want you to think, how much influence does Christ actually have in your life? How much does he affect you? How much does he change you? And just take a moment to think of that, Brother Boy.